A younger brother's engagement dinner. He raised his glass and smiled at the room. To my sister, he said, who just got let go from another firm. Maybe it's time she tried OnlyFans, at least she'd finally finish something. My father laughed into his scotch. She'd probably get fired from that too. The laughter started then stopped, all at once, when the woman in the navy coat walked through the door of the Granite Club and her eyes went straight to mine. I should back up. It was a Wednesday morning in late February when the security guard appeared beside my desk. Snow was coming down hard against the windows of the 38th floor of First Canadian Place, the kind of wet Toronto snow that makes the whole city slow down and feel sorry for itself. I had a tea-going cold in my hand. My calendar had a one-on-one with my director scheduled for 10:15. It was 9:46. "Ms. Doucette, I'll need to walk you out when you're ready." He said it kindly. He had the face of someone's grandfather, white mustache, soft eyes, the navy uniform of the building security, not anything internal. I remember thinking that detail was strange. They brought in someone from outside, like they didn't trust their own people to do it. I looked at him. I looked at my screen, which had a half-written email to a client about the Q1 risk assessment. I looked at the small framed photo of my mom on my desk, the one taken at her 60th birthday, 6 months before the cancer diagnosis. 8 years gone now, and I still kept her facing me while I worked. I looked at my coffee mug from a Banff trip with my old roommate, the one with the moose on it that said I'd rather be in the mountains. I looked at the little jade plant my mom had given me when I started this job. I looked back at the security guard. "Am I being terminated? I'm just here to walk you out, ma'am." That's how I knew. If you've ever felt like the people who are supposed to love you most have spent your whole life making you feel small, please consider subscribing. This story is for you. It's free and it helps these stories find the women who need them. Now let me tell you what happened next, because I promise, the part you're waiting for is coming. A woman from HR named Brittany met me at the elevators with a banker's box, already assembled. The flaps tucked just so, like someone had been folding it while I was answering emails. She walked me back to my desk and stood there with that practiced, sympathetic expression that HR people learn somewhere, while I packed up 6 years of my professional life into a box smaller than my microwave. Mom's photo, the moose mug, the J plant, a stack of business cards that said Hélène Doucette, Senior Manager, Enterprise Risk with the firm's logo on them. I'd been so proud the day those cards arrived. I'd sent one to my dad and a card. He'd never mentioned receiving it. Nobody on the floor looked up. That was the part that hurt the most, in that moment. Not the firing. Not the box. The fact that 32 of my colleagues kept their eyes glued to their monitors while a security guard walked me past their desks. I had brought butter tarts to the office every Christmas for 6 years. I had covered for Priya when her mother was in hospital. I had sat through Ben's divorce in the break room for the better part of last winter. And not one of them looked up. The elevator dinged. The guard walked me down to the lobby. He said, very quietly, "I'm sorry, Ms. Doucette. For what it's worth, you carried yourself with more dignity than most." Then he went back upstairs. I stood on the corner of King and Bay with a cardboard box in my arms and the snow piling up on my hair. And I genuinely could not remember which way the subway was. I had walked that route every weekday for 6 years and I just stood there. A man in a Canada Goose parka bumped into me and said sorry the way Canadians say sorry when they want you to move. I took an Uber home to Roncesvalles, $47. I cried the whole way. My phone buzzed when I was unlocking my apartment door. It was my dad. "How's the workday going, kiddo?" I stood there in the hallway with my key still in the lock and I thought, he knows. I don't know how I knew that he knew, but I knew. My father had been at this game his whole life. He had a sixth sense for the smell of failure on his daughter. I typed back, "Just got laid off." 3 dots. Then, key. That was it, a thumbs up, like I'd told him I picked up the dry cleaning. Then my brother heard the news. "Maybe cousin Tracy can get you shifts at the LCBO. And then a gif of a sad clown. I sat down on the floor of my entryway, still in my coat, the box beside me, and I laughed. I actually laughed. Because what else are you gonna do? I was 36 years old. I had a Schulich MBA. I had a CFA. I had spent the last 6 years working 70-hour weeks at one of the big 5 consulting firms, billing clients in 3 provinces, and the men who shared my last name thought my professional collapse was material for a group chat. Let me tell you about being the smart daughter in a family that was waiting for a son. My brother was born when I was 4. I remember the day they brought him home because my dad picked him up and said, "There he is, the future." Not to me, just out loud. Like I wasn't there. I was 4. I remember. I went on to skip grade 3. I won the regional science fair in grade 7. I got a 96 average in grade 12 and a full ride to Western. My brother took 6.5 years to finish a 3-year general arts degree at a school I won't name out of charity. When I got into Schulich, my dad said, "That's nice, sweetie. Did you hear your brother got promoted at the dealership?" My brother sold cars. His promotion was that he got to keep selling cars, but with a slightly bigger desk. My mom knew. My mom always knew. She would catch my eye across the dining room table when my dad was bragging about some new nothing my brother had done, and she would give me the small tired smile, like, "I see you, honey, I see you." She died of pancreatic cancer the spring I finished my MBA. I gave the eulogy. My brother didn't speak. My dad spoke for 40 minutes and mentioned my brother 9 times and me twice, both times in the context of Hélène was a good help to her mother during the illness. I want you to understand. I'd had 36 years of practice at being invisible to the men in my own family. I had built a whole career on being too useful to ignore and the rest of the world to make up for it. And on a Wednesday in February, a security guard with a white mustache walked me out of that career, and I sat on my entryway floor and I laughed. Then I called the only person I'd ever trusted with anything important. My mom's younger sister. My aunt. The one person on either side of my family who'd ever told me you were extraordinary and they're fools. She lived in Halifax. She picked up on the second ring. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. When I was finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Hélène, sweetheart, do you think this was about your job?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, your father just had lunch with your brother 3 weeks ago at the Albany Club. I know because your father called me afterward to gloat about it. He told me your brother had finally found a real opportunity. Something in finance in Toronto. Something that would bring him up to your level." I went very still on the floor. "He didn't say where," she said. "He wouldn't. But I want you to think very carefully, Hélène. About who your brother might have been talking to. About who would have a reason to make sure you weren't in the way." I sat with that for a week. I'd like to tell you I sprang into action, that I was the kind of woman who responds to disaster with a plan. I wasn't, not at first. I spent a week in the same pair of gray sweatpants. I ate low-bloss rotisserie chicken straight out of the bag. I watched all of Schitt's Creek again, including the one where Moira loses her wigs, and I cried so hard I thought I was going to be sick. And then on the 8th day, I got an email from my managing director. I should explain. The MD I'd worked with for 6 years was a man named Kavi. He was the one who'd hired me. He'd promoted me twice. He'd written me a recommendation for my CFA sponsorship. He was, I had thought, a friend. He had not been at the firing. He hadn't called. The email was the first I'd heard from him since the day before I was let go. The email said, "Lane, I need to see you. Not at the office. Café Paminar in Kensington, Saturday at 2. Come alone. Please don't reply by email." I went. It was the Saturday before the family day long weekend. Kensington was quiet under fresh snow. Kavi was in the back of the cafe with a tea in front of him. He hadn't shaved. He was wearing a maple leafs toque, which I had never in my life seen him wear, and I realized later he was trying not to be recognized. He didn't waste time. "Hélène, I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that telling you this could end my career. So I need you to listen, and I need you to think very carefully about what you do next. Okay, your termination wasn't performance-based. I figured that, Kavi, I was instructed to terminate you by a senior partner who was approached by an outside party. The cafe music kept playing, something Persian and minor key, and I put my hands flat on the table. Tell me. There's a man named Garrett. Kavi said the name like he was spitting out a fishbone. He's a junior partner at the firm, came over from Bay Street about a year ago, moves in certain circles, by which I mean he plays squash with people who play squash with people. 3 weeks ago he came into our partner meeting with a folder. The folder contained doctored emails. They appeared to be from you. To a competitor firm, discussing an active client engagement. The implication was you were leaking confidential information for a job offer. I couldn't breathe. They were fakes. Hélène. I knew they were fakes the moment I saw them. The metadata was wrong. The phrasing was wrong. You don't write the way those emails were written. But the senior partner. You know who I mean. He didn't want a problem. He didn't want to have to investigate. He wanted you gone, quietly, with a non-disparagement agreement and a small severance, before the so-called information could become a liability. Who gave Garrett the folder? Kavi. He looked at me. Your brother. I want to tell you that. In that moment I felt rage. I didn't. I felt this strange cold clarity, like someone had finally turned on a light in a basement I'd been stumbling around in my whole life. Of course. My brother who couldn't write a coherent email had, somehow, fabricated a paper trail sophisticated enough to get me fired from a Big Five firm. Except, he hadn't done it alone. My father, I said. Kavi didn't answer. He didn't have to. He took a sip of his tea and said, Hélène, I'm telling you this because I owe you. You saved my numbers 2 years ago when I was about to lose my book. I haven't forgotten. But I need you to understand. If you make a single move, anywhere, that traces back to me, I will deny we ever had this conversation. I have 2 kids. I have a mortgage in Leaside. I cannot be your witness. Do you understand me? I understand. Now, he said. And he reached into his coat and pulled out a USB stick and slid it across the table. There are some things on here that you didn't get from me, including the original email files with their actual metadata, including a list of the partner's calendar entries for the week your brother showed up, including the building security logs. From there, you're on your own. I took the USB. I held it in my fist all the way home on the streetcar. That night I did something I should have done a long time before. I called my mom's best friend. My mom's best friend was a woman named Constance, who had been a forensic accountant for 40 years, who had retired to a farm outside Peterborough, and who had been my godmother at a baptism I don't remember. She and my mom had been roommates at university. She had loved my mom and she despised my father, and she'd been waiting, I think, for 30 years for one of us to finally call. I told her everything. The USB. Kavi. My brother. My father. The way my dad had texted a thumbs up. When I finished, she said, Hélène, sweet girl, get on the train tomorrow morning, bring the USB, we have work to do. I want to tell you about the next 11 weeks because they were the most alive I have ever felt. I rented a little Airbnb above a bakery in Peterborough. I drove out to Constance's farm every morning at 7. We worked at her kitchen table with 2 laptops and a printer and a shared spreadsheet and a rolled chocolate lab named Reggie sleeping on my feet. Constance taught me things I didn't know existed. She taught me how to read a corporate registry. She taught me how to follow money through number companies in Ontario. She taught me what to look for in a bank wire that had been routed through 3 jurisdictions to look like consulting fees. She taught me what bonded warehouse fraud looked like, and how to spot a shell company by the way its fiscal year was structured. Here's what we found. My brother had not, in fact, been hired by a finance firm in Toronto. He had been hired by a numbered company. The numbered company had a single director, my brother. The numbered company billed a real firm, a mid-sized investment shop on Bay Street, for strategic consulting services to the tune of just over $400,000 over the previous 14 months. The mid-sized investment shop was being audited, not publicly, quietly, by the OSC. The reason they were being audited was that someone, and we never did find out who, though Constance had her suspicions, had filed a tip about irregular consulting expenses being used to launder kickbacks to a client-facing executive who was steering institutional pension money toward underperforming products in exchange for personal benefit. That client-facing executive's name on the disclosure forms was Albert Dessette, my father. My father had retired from Sun Life 4 years ago, but he had stayed on as an external advisor to the same mid-sized investment shop. He sat on a committee. He had influence over which pension fund products got which allocations, and he had been steering business toward the firm in question in exchange for consulting fees paid to a numbered company directed by his son, my brother, who had never consulted on anything more complex than which beer to order at the keg. The 2 of them, my father and my brother, had been running a small, ugly, garden-variety financial fraud, and they had been doing it for at least 14 months. and they had needed to get me out of my career because Constance worked this out before I did. The firm I worked for had just been retained to do an enterprise risk audit on the very investment shop my father was bleeding. I would have found it. Within 90 days of starting that engagement, I would have found my own father's name in the consulting expense line items, and they knew it. So they got rid of me first. I sat with that for a long time. I sat at Constance's kitchen table with Reggie's head on my knee, and I cried, finally, properly. Not the laughing cry from the entryway floor. A real cry. The kind where you mourn something. I was mourning the version of my father I had carried around in my head for 36 years. The cold one, the dismissive one, but still mine. The one I had still, in some small, embarrassed corner of myself, been trying to impress. That man was gone. He had never really existed. When I was finished crying, I wiped my face on my sleeve, and I asked Constance, "Now what?" "Now," she said, "we make sure you do this right. We don't do this for revenge. We do this for the record, and then we let the record do the work." I called the OSC investigator on the file. Constance had the number. The investigator was a woman named Yolanda. I gave her everything we had. She thanked me. She told me very carefully that she could not promise me anything about timelines or outcomes. I told her I didn't need promises. I just needed her to have what we had. Then, 3 days later, I called my brother. "Hey kiddo," he said. The condescension in his voice nearly knocked me down. "How's the job hunt going? Any nibbles?" "Hey," I said. "Listen, I wanted to tell you, no hard feelings about the GIF. I get it, you and Dad like to joke around. I was hoping I could come to your engagement dinner." There was a pause. "Really? Really? I'd like to make peace, honestly. I've been doing some thinking. Mom would want us to be a family. I am not proud of using my mother that way. I am not proud of using my mother that way. I will live with it." "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, okay. Yeah, come. Dad'll be glad. It's at the Granite Club. Saturday after next. 7. I marked it on my calendar. And then I called the woman in the navy coat. I haven't told you about her yet. Her name was Margot Tremblay. She was the new managing partner at my old firm. She had taken over 4 months before I was let go, brought in from Montreal to clean up a culture problem the firm had been having, and she was, I had heard, secondhand, not the kind of person you wanted on the wrong side of. I had only met her once, at an all-hands. She had said hello to me in French. I had answered in French. She had smiled. I called her assistant. I said it was urgent. I said it concerned the integrity of an active client engagement. The assistant called me back in 17 minutes with a meeting time. I went to her office, same building, 38th floor. I had to wear a visitor's lanyard. Some of the same people who had not looked up from their monitors 3 months ago looked up now. I did not look back at them. Margot let me speak for 40 minutes without interrupting. I had a binder. Constance had taught me to make a binder. I walked her through the doctored emails, the metadata, the consulting fees, the numbered company, the OSC file, my father's role, my brother's role, Garrett's role. When I was done, she closed the binder, and she said in French, "Ces hommes is ont un grave erreur. These men have made a serious mistake." She told me 3 things. She told me that Garrett would be terminated for cause that afternoon and that the firm would be filing a complaint with the Law Society over his conduct. She told me that I would be reinstated, with full back pay, with an apology in writing, and with a promotion to director that had been blocked by the senior partner who approved my termination. A senior partner who was, apparently, also retiring earlier than planned. And she told me, this is the part I want you to understand, that she would be attending my brother's engagement dinner on Saturday. As my +1. If I would have her, I would. The Granite Club is on Bayview, up in North Toronto, the kind of place where the parking lot has more Range Rovers than the showroom that sold them. My father had been a member for 30 years. My brother's fiancée, a perfectly nice young woman named Madeline who I felt very sorry for, came from a family that had been members for 60. The engagement dinner was in the Wedgwood room. White tablecloths. Prime rib. A pianist playing Gershwin. I wore a navy suit, not because Margot had worn navy, because navy was my mother's favorite color on me. "You look like someone who knows what she's doing," she used to say. I arrived at 6:55. I was alone. Margot was running 10 minutes late on purpose. We had planned it. My father saw me come in, and his face did a complicated thing. Surprise, then a quick recalculation, then warmth. The warmth he could put on like a coat. "Sweetheart," he said, kissing my cheek. "I'm so glad you came." My brother had clearly had 3 drinks already. He hugged me hard and laughed in my ear. "Big sister, look at you, looking sharp. You meet anyone yet? Madeline's cousin Trevor is single, just saying." I smiled. I made small talk. I admired Madeline's ring. I sat through the soup course and the salad course and the prime rib, and I let my father talk about my brother and the wedding plans and the cottage they were going to buy together as a family investment, and I drank exactly half a glass of Pinot Noir and I waited. Around 8:20, my brother stood up. He clinked his glass with his fork. He had wanted to give a toast, you see. I'd known he would. He always did. "To my beautiful Madeline," he said. "To my dutiful Madeline," he said. "To my dad, the best mentor a guy could ask for. And to my sister." A look came into his eyes. The look I had seen at every family gathering of my entire life. The look that said, "Now I'm going to take a little something from you, in front of everyone, because I can." "Got laid off again," he said to the table. "Tough year for old Helen. Maybe it's time she gave OnlyFans a try, eh? At least she'd finally finish something." My father laughed into his scotch. "She'd probably get fired from that too." The table laughed. The table laughed for about 3 seconds. And then the laughter started to die down, the way laughter does when something is wrong but no one has put a finger on what, and then it died completely. Because Margot Tremblay had walked into the Wedgwood room in a navy coat with snow still on the shoulders, and she was looking at me, and behind her, and this part I had not planned? This was Margot's own touch. Were 2 officers from the OSC and a quiet, unsmiling man from the RCMP Integrated Market Enforcement Team. The pianist stopped playing Gershwin. I stood up from my chair. I did not raise my voice. I have never in my life needed to raise my voice. "Dad," I said, "I'd like you to meet my colleagues." Margot walked the length of the room. She did not look at my brother. She did not look at my brother. She looked at me. She put her hand on my shoulder. She said in her perfect even voice, "Hélène, you don't have to do this part." "I know," I said. "I want to." I turned to the table. I told them very calmly that my father had been the subject of a securities investigation for the past 6 months, that my brother had been the registered director of a numbered company being used to launder kickbacks, that the 2 of them, working together, had fabricated evidence to have me terminated from my position so that I would not stumble onto their fraud during an upcoming audit, that I had spent the last 3 months, with help, gathering the evidence that the OSC was now in possession of, that my brother's fiancée, and here, I looked at Madeline, who had gone the color of skim milk, deserved to know what kind of family she was about to legally bind herself to before the wedding invitations went out. I told them that I had been reinstated at my firm with a promotion to director. I told them that the senior partner who had signed my termination letter had just announced his early retirement. I told my brother very quietly that the consulting income he had reported on his last 2 tax returns was about to be reclassified by the CRA as proceeds of crime, and that he might want to call a lawyer before he called his fiancé's father. I told my father, and this is the part I will remember on my deathbed, I told my father that I had loved him my entire life, and that I had spent 36 years auditioning for his approval, and that I was finished, that my mother had known what he was, that she had told me before she died, "Hélène, you do not owe him anything you have not already given him 100 times over," and that I was, finally, going to listen to her. The 2 OSC officers asked my father if he would step out into the lobby. He did. He didn't argue. He walked between them with his shoulders down for the first time in his life. The RCMP officer asked my brother if he would do the same. He did. After his fiancée Madeleine very quietly took the engagement ring off her finger and laid it on the bread plate, I sat back down. The pianist, after a long moment, started up again. He played, for some reason, Moon River. I think he was nervous. I think he didn't know what else to do. Margot sat in my father's chair beside me. She picked up her napkin and put it in her lap. "Eh bien," she said. "Shall we order dessert? I want to tell you about Constance." After the Granite Club, after the audit, after my brother's plea agreement and my father's 8-month sentence at a minimum security facility outside Gravenhurst, after the divorce I didn't know my mother had been planning before she died. Yes, I found the papers after the OSC closed the file and my own promotion went through, and I started showing up at the office on the 38th floor every day with my mom's photo on a new desk in a corner office. After all of that, I drove up to Peterborough. I brought her a cheesecake from Wanda's. I sat at her kitchen table with Reggie on my feet, and I said, I want to set up a fund. She looked at me over her glasses. I want it in your name, I said. I want it in your name, I said. I want it big enough that you don't have to think about it. I want it to pay out, every year, to women in this country who get pushed out of their professions by men with more money than ethics. I want a real lawyer to write up the criteria. I want the first grant to go to a forensic accountant who can't afford her CPA dues. I want it called the Marie Claire Doucette Memorial Fund, after my mother, and I want you to be the chair of it for as long as you want to be. And I want you to take a salary, because the work you did with me was worth more than any consulting fee my brother ever fake invoiced. Constance, who had not cried in front of me once in 12 weeks of forensic accounting, took her glasses off and pressed them against her eyes. Sweet girl, she said. Mom told me before she died, I said. She told me the most graceful thing you can ever do is refuse to be quiet about the people who deserve to be heard. I didn't understand it at the time. I think I do now. We funded it in May. We had our first grant cycle by Labor Day. The first recipient was a woman in Winnipeg. The second was a woman in St. John. The third was Margaret, the cleaner at my old firm, who turned out to have been a CMA in the Philippines before she emigrated and who had been mopping floors at our firm for 9 years because no one would credential her work. I wrote her a recommendation myself. She started in our compliance group in October. She makes more than I did when I was let go. I think about my mother every day. I think about the way she would catch my eye across the dining room table. I think about how she knew the whole time, and how she stayed for me, and how she finally couldn't stay, and how she trusted me to figure it out without her. I think about the security guard with the white mustache. I sent him a Christmas card. I think about my father in a low-security facility in Muskoka, and I do not write to him. He has written to me twice. I have not opened the letters. Maybe one day. Maybe not. I think about my brother, who is now selling cars again, in a different province, under his fiancée's family name, which she did not give him, but which he took anyway because his own had become a problem. But mostly I think about that moment in the Granite Club, when the laughter froze, the 3 full seconds of silence before Margot walked in, because in those 3 seconds, before the cavalry arrived, before the OSC officers and the RCMP officer and the OPME officer and the reinstatement and the promotion and the fund, in those 3 seconds I was already free. I was already someone they could not touch. I had become her, the woman they thought I would never be, not by their permission, but in spite of it. The cavalry was just paperwork. The freedom was already mine. That's the part I want you to take with you if you are watching this and you have your own brother, your own father, your own table full of people who laugh at the wrong moments. You don't need them to stop laughing. You just need to stop laughing. You just need to stop waiting for them to. If this story meant something to you, hit the like button. Tell me in the comments, was there ever a moment in your own life when the laughter froze? I read everyone. And if you want more stories about quiet women who finally stopped being quiet, subscribe to The Quiet Bonds and ring the bell. There's a new one every week. I'll see you there. I've thought about that Wednesday morning more times than I can count. The security guard with the white mustache. The banker's box already folded. The 32 colleagues who would not lift their eyes from their monitors. For a long time, I tried to make sense of it the way I made sense of everything else in my life, by asking what I had done wrong. That was the trap I'd been raised inside. If something hurt, I must have earned it. What I learned, slowly in the months I spent at Constance's kitchen table with Reggie's head warm on my feet, is that some things do not happen because of you. They happen because of the people around you, and the choices those people made long before you were in the room. My father chose, somewhere along the way, to believe that his son was an extension of him and his daughter was a competitor. My brother chose, every time he had the option, to take the easier road and let someone else carry the cost. Those choices accumulated. They piled up year over year, decision over decision, until they collapsed under their own weight in a private dining room at the Granite Club. I didn't pull that building down. They built it crooked from the start. Cause and effect is patient. That's the part I want to tell you. My father didn't get caught because of one phone call to the OSC. He got caught because for 14 months, he had been treating other people's pension money like a Christmas bonus, and that kind of behavior leaves a trail whether anyone is following it or not. My brother didn't lose his fiancée because of a toast. He lost her because the toast was the latest entry in a ledger she had, somewhere in herself, already started keeping. The reckoning isn't sudden. It just looks sudden from the outside. What I want for you, if you've stayed with me this long, is 3 things. I want you to be honest. Honest the way Constance was honest with me at her kitchen table when she said, "Hélène, this is not just bad, this is criminal." Honesty is the thing that lets you see the binder for what it is, instead of what you wish it was. I want you to be smart. Smart enough to make the binder. Smart enough to call the aunt, the godmother, the old colleague, the people who have been waiting for you to ask. The smart move is almost never the loud one. It is almost always the patient one. And I want you to be brave, not the brave of speeches. The brave of standing up at a table where everyone is laughing at you and saying, calmly, without raising your voice, "I'd like you to meet my colleagues." My mother knew what my father was. She stayed for me, and she paid for that decision with her quiet, "I will not pay with mine." If a security guard ever walks up to your desk on a Wednesday morning, I hope you laugh on the entryway floor like I did, and then I hope you call the right person, and then I hope you build the binder. The cavalry is just paperwork. The freedom is already yours the moment you decide you are done auditioning.